It is Thursday, the last day of March. A massive misjudgment, British spy boss on President Putin's manoeuvres, plus his views on how Russian soldiers are refusing to carry out orders.
It increasingly looks like Putin has massively misjudged the situation.
I'm live in western Ukraine as President Zelenskyy says his forces are preparing for new Russian attacks in the east as Moscow bolsters its forces in the Donbass region.
Cost of living crisis with bills on the rise and the energy price cap about to come in. We speak to a pensioner and a widow in dire straits.
Oh, wow! Wow!
Still processing it, Chris Rock speaks out about that Oscar slap as the Academy reveals they asked Will Smith to leave, and he said no.
On the last day of free universal lateral flow tests in England, a warning from a disability charity, the government is showing a disregard for the most vulnerable.
Well, as the Parole board recommends the mother of baby P should be set free, we'll ask the former chair of Ofsted if decisions like this keep the public safe. Also coming up on the programme for you today, wherever you're watching us around the world.
My universe will never be the same. I'm glad you came. I'm glad you came.
Sending my love. Ed Sheeran leads tributes to the Wanted star Tom Parker, who's died from a brain tumour at the age of just 33. And here's a question for you for Thursday morning. Do you have any idea what that plant is? Well, we'll be speaking to the first Westerner to get a glimpse of this rare flower in the Philippines about his mammoth trek to get there. Hello everybody, a very good morning to you. We start with an intervention from a spy boss on President Putin's intentions in Ukraine. The UK's top spy chief, that's Sir Jeremy Fleming, who is the director of GCHQ, has given a rare speech saying the Russian leader has made a massive misjudgment on the capabilities of his own military might. He also claims that Putin's soldiers are defying orders and accidentally shooting down their own aircraft. Sir Jeremy also said the Kremlin is turning to private mercenaries to help them in the war. He said the Wagner Group is going in to bolster numbers, but said they are likely to be used as cannon fodder to try to limit Russian losses. The Ukrainian president says his troops are preparing for the Russians to launch large assaults in the east of the country in the Donbass region.
It increasingly looks like Putin has massively misjudged the situation. It's clear he's misjudged the resistance of the Ukrainian people. He underestimated the strength of the coalition his actions would galvanise. He underplayed the economic consequences of the sanctions regime. And he overestimated the abilities of his military to secure a rapid victory. We've seen Russian soldiers, short of weapons and morale, refusing to carry out orders, sabotaging their own equipment, and even accidentally shooting down their own aircraft. And even though we believe Putin's advisors are afraid to tell him the truth, what's going on and the extent of these misjudgments must be crystal clear to the regime.
We'll be chatting to Tom Cheshire in just a second in Beijing, but first let's bring in Dominic Waghorn, should we, our International Affairs editor. He's in Lviv for us this morning. How should we interpret this? Dominic, good morning.
Morning, Kay. Well, I think in some ways it's revealing in some ways what Sir Jeremy Fleming is fairly predictable. He is saying that the cyber actors, so his opposite numbers on the Russian side, are doing what you'd expect them to do, disrupting Ukrainian intelligence and military and government systems, but also saying that could spill over into neighbouring countries and further afield to Britain, if you like, also. But what he's saying about Putin, I think, is revealing. For months in the run-up to the invasion and in the weeks since the invasion began, we've been trying to second guess, working out what is going on in Putin's mind, and obviously Western policymakers have been as well. And Fleming's in this unique position. He has all this information that GCHQ is feeding in through surveillance monitoring that gives a good picture, as good a picture possibly as we can get, certainly in the West, of what is happening with Putin. And what he's saying is Putin has been badly advised. He has massively misjudged the situation in Ukraine in terms of what his troops could expect invading, but also in terms of the way sanctions could respond. And he's saying that even Russians are shooting down their own planes. And I think the concern is that this is an isolated, ill-advised Russian leader whose next actions are unpredictable and therefore quite volatile.
Thanks very much indeed, Dominic. Let's bring in Tom as well, should we, from a China perspective. Your thoughts from Beijing this morning, please, Tom.
Morning, Kate. I mean, yeah, it was striking that despite the focus on Ukraine, there was a lot of room for China in Sir Jeremy's speech. And he warned about the alignment between China and Russia. He said it might bring risk to China as well because Russia does not play by the global rules and China wants that leadership role. But I don't think that will have much effect. We had the foreign minister of Russia here in China yesterday and they reiterated that partnership. They said again that it had no limits and that had already withstood the first test. But I think that speech from their director of GCHQ saying, look, the West is preoccupied, it's busy with Ukraine. That doesn't mean it's forgotten about the wider world, and especially the role of China in that world and the world to come. As Jeremy talked of a generational upheaval, that's how China sees it as well. It's clear that Ukraine's happening in Eastern Europe, but there is a wider picture here that GCHQ is very much paying attention to.
Gentlemen, thank you both. Let's bring in the International Trade Secretary, Anne-Marie Trevelyan, with us in the studio this morning. Good morning, good morning. Thanks for joining us on Sky News Breakfast this morning. So we've heard what GCHQ have been saying, the head of GCHQ. Putin obviously coming up with a very different story. Where's the government this morning?
So the Prime Minister continues to be very clear that Putin must fail in his outrageous and illegal war in invading Ukraine, and the UK government will continue to work hand in glove with both our US and our EU allies to support Ukraine to defend their territorial country borders and to make sure that Putin turns his tanks around and takes them home.
Putin still has some friends amongst the international community, not least India. You were there, I think, in January, am I right in saying? And we're looking to do a trade deal with them later on. But they refused to condemn what was happening in Ukraine. They don't seem to, as a result, be respecting international borders. Do we really want to do a trade deal with a country like that?
So the Foreign Secretary has gone out to India this week to have conversations with her Indian counterpart and to discuss what is a difficult situation, I think, for all of us who are democratic nations, and India, of course, is the largest democracy in the world, that standing up for democratic nations and peaceful borders, which Ukraine's have been breached, is something that we want to see everyone doing. And I know that Liz Truss will be continuing to have those discussions with the ministers in India to do that. Our trade talks are at a relatively early level at the moment, and officials met 10 days ago for some discussions, which are progressing. But we will continue those for the time being, as we have several trade deals on the go, and see how we progress. But it's really important that we see India. We understand why they've chosen to sit on the fence at the moment. They have connections in both directions. But for us, it's really important to see all countries who believe in democracy and the rule of law, and indeed defending your own territorial borders and wanting to have that sovereignty, respected by those around you, to stand up for that.
Yeah, but does it really sit comfortably with you doing business with a country that, by omission, is sanctioning the death of innocents?
So no, it doesn't. And I think we have to be clear that we continue to stand up, as I say, for democratic countries where the right to live peacefully in your sovereign nation is something that should be respected by all. And I know that Liz Truss will be continuing to do what it is the Foreign Office's job to do, to present those arguments and trying to persuade her colleagues in India of the merits of giving their opinion on Putin's outrageous illegal war.
When are we going to allow more Ukrainians to come into our sovereign nation and get rid of the logjam that seems to be holding up so many of them who need our help most at this very vulnerable time?
Absolutely, and the two schemes that are now up and running are moving at pace. I think the latest figures are that 25,000 visas have now been granted. And I know that Lord Harrington, who has been brought in to oversee this, is working literally all hours that God sends to try and make the process as slick as possible. We have obviously surged more both Home Office and military support into Poland and other locations to help do the processing at pace. One of the things we have released is that if you have a passport, a Ukrainian passport, you can do the biometric checks once you get to the UK, which is a great news and a real help. But of course, many Ukrainians didn't have a passport, they only had identity cards. So in which case they do need to be going to these visa centres in order to get a passport to do that. So we are continuing to surge and to work, and I think it's about 1,000 a day now being processed, which is great news.
How many have come to the UK?
So I understand that 25,000 visas have now been issued. I don't have those figures, I'm afraid, Kate.
But it's significantly less than that. Significantly fewer, I should say.
So we will continue to see, I think, in the weeks and months ahead.
Talk to me about the golden visas. I was reading in my morning newspapers that obviously the golden visa scheme was under Labour, but it was ramped up significantly under David Cameron's government. Basically, if a Russian oligarch had £2 million to invest in the UK, just for the benefit of our viewers, I'm sure you know, they were fast-tracked to come into the UK. 8 of them now have, in the Prime Minister's words, Ukrainian blood on their hands, and they've been sanctioned. What does that say about the British government's judgment?
So the sanctions scheme that we have brought in, as I say, alongside our US and EU colleagues, has been absolutely rigorous. We have made sure that, the Foreign Secretary has worked incredibly hard to make sure that all the sanctions we bring are ones that will hold absolutely firm in the court of law. And I think we have the highest number of individuals now sanctioned. And I think what's so important now is that we make sure that we hold everyone firm on this. So there are some who say if Putin just demonstrates that he might want to step back, we should all start to unravel. These sanctions are there to make it very, very clear that Putin's war must fail and that Putin's behaviour is unacceptable, and that the financial pressures that we are applying both to him and to those who support him, who are oligarchs, regardless of where they happen to be living now, cannot sustain their lifestyles. We will not allow that in the UK.
But that doesn't really answer my question. My question is, what does it say about the judgment of the British government when they're giving golden visas to people who the Prime Minister now says has Ukrainian blood on their hands?
So historic visas have a position, and of course the key point is that in sanctioning we are making a very clear statement for those who are for those who have demonstrably not come in and been supporters and worked in the UK and been perfectly legitimate members of our UK society, bringing as you say wealth and indeed lots of experience in business development. Those are being sanctioned. They have been punished for their relationship and their support of Putin.
Bad judgment to let them in the first place.
Well, as we say, we are now sanctioning those who have very clearly taken a position with Putin. But there are many who have stood up against Putin and who are here and have the protection and the safety of the UK because they are standing against Putin, and we commend them for their bravery.
Yeah, talking about bad judgment, 20 fines issued as far as Partygate is concerned, 20 instances of the law being broken so far. There will be more, we're led to believe, by the Metropolitan Police. The Prime Minister is still refusing to say that the law was broken. The Deputy Prime Minister was sat where you are this time yesterday morning. He said that there were clear breaches of the law. Where are you on that?
So the Met Police, as you say, Kate, are continuing their review, and as the Prime Minister said, we want them to complete whatever it is, the path that they're going to do. And the Prime Minister has committed that he will ask Sue Gray to do not sure what we're going to call it, a wrap-up report looking at everything, and that he will come to Parliament to discuss it then. So I'm always been in the case, I'd rather let the professionals get on and complete the work they're doing, and then the Sue Gray report number 2, which will be able to put all the evidence that she gathered into the round, and indeed for the Prime Minister to be able to come and talk to the House at that point. That being said, was the law broken? So, as I say, the Prime Minister has been clear that he wants to be able to come back to the House and discuss this. I'm not asking what the Prime Minister thinks. But that's the point. So what you think. What do you think? So I want to make sure that we let the Met Police do that without interference from commentary. They've already said on 20 occasions they've issued fixed penalty notices. You get one of those if you break the law. And so we will see when the full completed report is done, and Sue Gray will then be able to publish hers. We'll be able to discuss it in detail. But as the Met Police haven't, published any names or any lists, I think at the moment I want to let them continue their work. But they've told us that on 20 instances the law was broken. Why is the Prime Minister not saying that? Well, because the Prime Minister's very clear, he wants to wait for the whole process to be
what
completed.
about you? How do you feel about? Do you think that they're wrong in issuing these fixed penalty notices?
I have no doubt that the police are issuing notices on the basis
the law was broken, then?
of those evidence, and I want to make sure that we can come back to the House and look at the whole thing in the round once they have completed their review of the process, and that the Sue Gray report, which I know many colleagues felt was sort of frustrated by the Met Police involvement, can then look at it in the round and Sue Gray's evidence can be presented to everyone.
So the Deputy Prime Minister, the Justice Secretary, a former lawyer, misspoke when he said there were clear breaches of the law?
No, he is the Justice Secretary and he has set out a position. I think if you or I get a fine, we hopefully pay it and move on from there. And I hope and I assume that those who have been fined by the police will pay their fines, and that will be the punishment that they have
and we
accepted.
Get a fine. Why do we get a fine? We get a fine if we break the law.
So indeed, when regulations are set out...
20 instances of fines being issued means that 20 instances people have broken the law.
Well, that's right. They've broken the regulations that were set in the COVID Act, and the police deem that that was what they did, and therefore they've been fined accordingly.
Why would the Prime Minister not say that?
Because, as I say, he wants to wait until the whole process of the police review has been done.
That, though, will it?
Well, that's the position he's taken, and I respect
but you
that.
agree that they've broken the law. OK. Let's talk about the Ockenden report. I mean, can't even begin to imagine. I think stomach lurchingly awful. And we saw some of the mums. I spoke to some of the mums yesterday. One mum whose child is brain damaged as a result of what happened. 201 babies died. What should happen to some of the people that were responsible? Should there be prosecutions? Should people be let go?
So I know that the Health Secretary said yesterday, I'm afraid I didn't hear his speech, but I was able to catch up on some of it, that he wants to make sure that those who were responsible for this, I mean, catastrophic series of failures over so many years are held to account.
And what does that look like?
Knowing SAGE, it will be very firm, and they will be taking the time to look through and really understand the depth of the problems, where there is real culpability, and where how that is dealt with. And I will leave that to the health team to do that. But I want to see those who are not fit to deliver not delivering the right care to be held to account for that. I mean, it's just appalling. One of the interesting things that I've caught briefly as I was able to look at the report last night was, of course, this, fashion is the wrong word, but this direction towards natural births away from caesareans at a point. And interestingly, as I read it, I realised that I was in a fantastic maternity hospital in Newcastle when I had my children, but actually that was culturally normal. And actually, for my eldest, it was a very, very difficult labour, which one has to question: was that the right choice? And I was not given the choice of a caesarean section at the time, which afterwards, for a number of reasons, might well have been the better choice. And I read that and thought, actually, has this been a culture that has pervaded to the point where there is very serious risk?
That was a similar situation with my child.
That really, really made my heart sink at the thought that my children are well and healthy, and I'm very blessed. But actually, to think that there are many for whom those medical choices left families either with, as you say, sick children or indeed loss of their child.
Before I let you go, I just want to ask about Jamie Wallis, brave young man, member of your party, who has made the comments that he's made about wanting to be transgender. The Prime Minister supporting him with a tweet. But I just wondered if you wanted to comment on this. I'm sure you will. Boris Johnson tweeting his support, but he had also said that the supper that he held for some members of the party a couple of nights ago. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, or as Keir Starmer would put it, people who are assigned female or male at birth. That was insensitive.
Jokes made at dinners are made. I think all of us who know the Prime Minister know he has a very, very warm and affectionate personality, and I think he is genuinely, proud and affectionate, and wants to support Jamie in his decision to share with the world his choice to present himself as trans. And I think, he's a lovely young man, and we are hugely, hugely proud of him. I think, this continuing discussion is so important, but it's also important that actually at the end of the day we respect and love each other as how we want to live our lives. And I think that's always what the Prime Minister wants to try and achieve. And we are incredibly proud of Jamie taking on what will, by definition, as a public person, be a lot of commentary about his choice. And I think that's incredibly brave. And, we absolutely cheer him on and want to make sure that he can either be an advocate in this space or, indeed, if he chooses to not want to be an advocate other than just getting on with being a great MP, that's great too.
OK, we're out of time. It would be good to talk about that in more detail and perhaps we'll chat to Jamie about it in the fullness of time. For now, thanks so much indeed. Thanks a lot. Let's look at the front pages for you. The Telegraph carries a quote from the head of GCHQ, Sir Jeremy Fleming's speech, with claims Vladimir Putin's advisers are afraid to tell him the truth about how Russia's invasion of Ukraine is playing out. The FT reports that the German and Austrian governments are poised to ration gas supplies for Russia. And the Metro reports on Jamie Wallis, just chatting about him, the Conservative who came out as the UK's first openly transgender MP and also revealed that he was raped and targeted in blackmail plot. Well, from tomorrow, the majority of people in England will have to pay for lateral flow tests. The decision has been criticised by some, with the disability equality charity Scope saying the move shows a total disregard from the government for the fears and concerns of people at risk. We sent Ivor to a pharmacy in southwest London to find out more. From tomorrow, you're going to have to pay for your lateral flows.
Yeah, officially the free testing ends tomorrow, but in practice I think a lot of people have found them hard to come by for a while now, including this pharmacy that hasn't actually had any for a couple of months now. Some still will be eligible for free tests after tomorrow, including the most vulnerable, when they have symptoms, but only then. And for a lot of charities, including Scope, as you mentioned there, that's simply not enough. Scope has been very critical, accusing the government of showing a total disregard of the fears of disabled people, because don't forget, these free tests have been a way for the most vulnerable to be able to return to their normal lives. And without them, many will feel unsafe and afraid to go out. The government, though, for their part, they say they're doing this because essentially it's costing a lot of money. This free testing is costing billions every month, and they feel we're now in a position with the vaccine and the antiviral medicines to be able to do this safely.
OK, thanks very much indeed. Thank you, Ivor. Looking at some of today's other headlines for you now. And the Beckhams' London property was reportedly broken into while members of the family were at home. David, Victoria and their daughter Harper are said to be unaware that an intruder was in the house at the time. In a statement, the Met Police said they were called to a property in Kensington on Tuesday, the 1st of March. Tributes are pouring in for the wanted star Tom Parker, who has died at the age of just 33. He'd been diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumour. The band rose to fame in 2009 and had two #1 singles, Glad You Came and All Time Low. After they disbanded in 2014, they once again reunited last year for a charity benefit when Tom told Sky News he was feeling a lot better.
I think with this disease you get quite a natural decline, but if anything, it seems to be on the incline. I feel a lot better than I did a couple of months ago. But yeah, just with my increasing health getting better, we're here today. I'm here today.
Well, Ed Sheeran has led the music industry in paying tribute to Tom Parker following his passing on Wednesday. In an Instagram post, Ed said, "It's so sad to hear of Tom's passing. Thoughts and love are with Kelsey, his children and his family. Very sad day. What a lovely guy." Tom, as I said, died at the age of just 33. He passed away peacefully, surrounded by his family and his friends. And sad news from the world of Hollywood too. Bruce Willis is retiring from his 30-year-long career after being diagnosed with a brain condition. Here he is in action.
Hey pal, how you feeling? All things being equal, I'd rather be in Philadelphia.
In a statement, the star's daughter, Ruma, confirmed that her father has aphasia, which is a condition which affects the ability to speak, write and understand language. Well, in a post to her Instagram followers, she wrote, "With much consideration, Bruce is stepping away from the career that has meant so much to him. We are moving through this as a strong family unit and wanted to bring his fans in because we know how much he means to you as you do to him." As Bruce always says, Live it up. And together we plan to do just that. Love Emma, Demi, Rumour, Scout, Tallulah, Mabel and Evelyn. Sad news indeed. Quick look at the weather.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Northerly wind will make it cold everywhere and will bring some snow mainly to the hills. Western parts are largely dry and clear now, but there are wintry showers in the north and the east.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show here on Sky News for you this morning. The UK's top spy chief, Sir Jeremy Fleming, who's the director of GCHQ, says Vladimir Putin has made a massive misjudgment on the capabilities of his own military might. 90% of people say their food bill has taken a hike as the UK prepares for gas and electricity bills to rise from tomorrow. It's been revealed that Will Smith was asked to leave the Oscars ceremony after slapping Chris Rock, but refused as the comedian breaks his silence. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss heads to India today as part of a wider diplomatic push on the war in Ukraine. Her trip coincides with her Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, also heading to the country. Earlier, I asked the International Trade Secretary, Anne-Marie Trevelyan, how she feels about trade talks with India, with the nation notably reluctant to comment on Russia's offensive in Ukraine.
It's really important that we see India. We understand why they've chosen to sit on the fence at the moment. They, have connections in both directions. But for us, it's really important to see all countries who believe in democracy and the rule of law, and indeed defending your own territorial borders and wanting to have that sovereignty, respected by those around you, to stand up for that.
Yeah, but does it really sit comfortably with you doing business with a country that, by omission, is sanctioning the death of innocents?
So no, it doesn't, and I think we have to be clear that we continue to stand up, as I say, for democratic countries where the right to live peacefully in your sovereign nation is something that should be respected by all. And I know that Liz Truss will be continuing to do what it is the Foreign Office's job to do, to present those arguments and trying to persuade her colleagues in India of the merits of giving their opinion on Putin's outrageous illegal war.
Thrilled to say Tamara's here. She's going on holiday next week, so make the most of her. What did you make of that?
Morning, Kay. Well, it was interesting, wasn't it? Liz Truss is in India. What can she achieve there, given that India is traditionally an ally of Moscow, refused to condemn the Ukraine invasion at the United Nations and buys a lot of Russian arms and oil? And Sergei Lavrov, rather awkwardly, is on his first visit since the invasion began, trying to convince the Indians to buy even more Russian oil. Liz Truss will say democracies need to work together. India, of course, is the world's largest democracy, but there's these big NATO and G7 meetings next week. India, of course, not in either of those, but they want India to be on side. Joe Biden's been pretty vocal, saying India's position on this is shaky, but not clear that she's going to achieve very much through that visit, despite the charm offensive the government is engaging in order to try and get a trade deal with India behind the scenes. And Anne-Marie Trevelyan, as good as confirmed that carries on regardless.
Partygate. Is it against the law what they've been doing or not?
Boris Johnson says it was not his understanding, and those words, his understanding, are very important, that the rules were broken at the time. So we can sort of see the outlines of his defence there, if it is, to those claims that he lied to or misled Parliament, that it was his understanding no parties had taken place. Of course, the difficulty is that he's accused of attending 6 of the 12 the Met are investigating. At the moment, the government's line is slightly confusing, but all will become clear once the police investigation is concluded.
OK, for now, thanks very much. Tomorrow's Take, 9 o'clock. Looking forward to it. Joining us now is General Lord Richard Dunnett, former Chief of the General Staff. Hello to you, my Lord. Thank you for joining us on the programme this morning. Are we taking at face value what the Russians are telling us in the form of President Putin, that they are moving back from cities like Kiev?
Well, I think we have to watch and see what's going on. That'll help us understand whether we can believe him. I think what is happening is that they're making much of the fact that they are going to withdraw at least some of their units around Kyiv. But in fact, I think what they're doing is consolidating their positions. A number of their units have got quite isolated. They got quite a long way forward. So they're withdrawing those. A number are being taken out of combat altogether because they've been pretty heavily hit. But I think where we can believe them is the fact that the main effort of their campaign is now switching from the failed rapid strike to effect regime change by capturing Kyiv, and they're switching it to the Donbass. And in a sense, this is fairly logical, a little bit unsurprising, given that since 2014, they have been fighting in those two eastern provinces to try and take control of them. So I think they're now realizing the difficult situation they're in. I think they're now realizing the poor performance of their military and are reassessing what they can achieve in this campaign and cutting their losses and putting their main effort, their focus on the Donbass region, bearing in mind also they will continue to create this land corridor from Crimea through Mariupol to the Donbass itself.
Could we move to the comments by the GCHQ head, Sir Jeremy Fleming, saying that Putin's advisors are lying to him about how badly they are doing? What credence should we give to that? And also, I suppose the flip side of that could be that if that is the case, Putin may ramp up the war.
Well, I think that's quite possible. What is interesting is that now the intelligence authorities of the UK and the US are saying what many of us who have been observing have begun to believe, that Putin must have been misled by his generals and by his security staff as to the capability of his armed forces before this campaign started. And I think he's been shielded to an extent from the harsh reality of what's been going on at the front. So he has believed that his own military is more capable than it's turned out to be. Now, you touch on the question, does that mean that he's still in the dark about the reality and he's going to order one more push, if you like, or is he going to accept where he is and change the plan? And if you take their published statements, it would look as if he is going to change the plan. They're going to consolidate, if not completely withdraw from the north and west of Kyiv, but make their main effort, as I said a moment or two ago, in the Donbass region, which is where they've been fighting since 2014.
Yeah. Meantime, mercenaries are being brought in from places like Syria and Chechnya. We're told being offered $7,000 to go to the front line. We're hearing that Syrian soldiers are accepting that money in order to try to pay to feed their families back home in Syria. But I suppose the other way of looking at it is that they are likely to become cannon fodder.
Well, Kay, I think sadly that is probably right. I'm not sure whether Syrian soldiers who are used to different kind of conditions really will be able to make much of a meaningful contribution in the Ukrainian the late winter, early spring. And just throwing soldiers, individual soldiers into the fight without them being in coordinated and well-trained units is tantamount, as you suggest, to making them cannon fodder. I think it's also a reflection on the fact that the Russians are short of manpower. We probably have all got too used to thinking that the Russian army is huge. It's large like it was in the Cold War days. It's not like that at all. And this force of 190,000 that they assembled and pushed in 4, 5, 6 weeks ago was, if you like, almost the cream of the Russian army. And a lot of that has now been battered and been dented. And manpower is an issue. And I think it's a sign of approaching desperation that they're willing to offer $7,000 to Syrians to come and join their fight. I'm afraid a lot of those Syrians will actually die pretty quickly in the harsh surroundings of Ukraine.
Yeah, I'm afraid we must leave it there, my lord, because we need to make room for the President of the Ukraine speaking to the Australian Parliament. Thank you for your time this morning. Thank you.
Right. Thanks.
It has never been that a country would block the whole sea for other vessels of any country. But this is exactly what was done by Russia. Part of the Black and Azov Sea is a Dead Sea these days. Any vessel that would try to come in can simply be destroyed by the Russian Navy. More than hundreds of trade vessels under different flags have been blocked by Russia in our ports. For dozens of years, we haven't seen this in the world for a country to start the war against a neighboring country, openly declaring their enslavement or destruction, not to leave even the name of that nation, not to have even any opportunity for this nation to live freely. The worst pages of the 20th century have been brought back by Russia already. The biggest threats of that century came back. The evil that humanity thought they had forgotten about a long time ago. But the most terrible thing, if we don't stop Russia now, if we don't hold Russia accountable, then some other countries of the world who are looking forward to the similar war against their neighbors will decide that such things are possible for them as well. The fate of the global security is decided now. No one can manage winds or precipitations. It means no one can save any part of the world from radioactive contamination which will come if nuclear weapons are used. No country in the world can theoretically should not have even a theoretical possibility of blocking trade fleet and block the seas for other countries. There shouldn't be even a theoretical possibility to do so. No leader of the world can count on being unpunishable if he's thinking about a prospective war. Ladies and gentlemen, the nation of Australia, after the more than a month of the full-fledged war against Russia, we can surely say that there is no only way of bringing the global security as bringing Russia to peace and silence and responsibility and accountability for everything that Russia has done against the global security. The country which is using the nuclear blackmailing should receive the sanctions which would show that such blackmailing is destructive for the blackmailer itself. There has to be an effective toolkit to hold responsible any country which is blocking the trade navigation, so for no one to have a temptation to close any sea and making the Dead Sea out of them. So far we don't have such instruments, so the leadership of Australia can be paramount for the global security, which is now strengthened, but our anti-war coalition, which is working on bringing the peace back to Ukraine. We need to also enhance the capabilities of the international institutions, which were created to hold military war criminals.
Okay. We will move away from the discussion between President Zelenskyy, speech by President Zelenskyy to the Australian Parliament, and bring you more later on. Just want to highlight this for you. You may be planning your Easter holidays because they're just around the corner, aren't they? Some of you may be thinking of booking a staycation somewhere scenic, perhaps involving a bit of a hike. Well, here in the UK, we're lucky to have some of the most stunning mountain ranges in the world. But whilst they're beautiful, they can also be very dangerous. Joined now by Sean Roberts, Principal at Glenmore Lodge, Scotland's National Outdoor Training Centre. Hello to you, Sean. Thanks very much indeed for joining us on the programme this morning. We have seen some deaths both at Ben Nevis and indeed Snowdon over the last few days and weeks. What's driving the increase, do you think?
Well, sadly, this winter we have seen deaths in our mountains, and there's always a range of factors that link into every incident, Kay. Many of them this winter have been some of the hard snowpack that we've had, and obviously any slip or trip has very serious consequences. But I know I'm in shadow this morning, but we were keen for everyone to see the snowy conditions we have at the moment. So our winter mountains are in full winter conditions. And there'll be many, many people, thousands of people preparing to head to the hills this morning. And all of those, I'm sure, will be having a great day out there. There's safe days to be had with the right planning and preparation.
And what do you need to look? We can see the difference there between the two scenes. What are your top tips for people who are thinking about heading to the mountains over Easter?
So we would just ask people to have a very progressive approach with their planning. And within that, ask themselves the what, where, the who and the why. So what information do you need? So obviously you need the weather. Most weather forecasts that we see on the telly is a sea level weather forecast. We expect conditions to be perhaps windier, colder, on the tops of our mountains, perhaps wetter as well. So always hunt out a mountain weather forecast. There are many available on the internet through the Met Office or the Mountain Weather Information Service. Now, as you can see behind me, it is winter at the moment. So in Scotland, we have the Scottish Avalanche Information Service. So again, if you're coming north to the Highlands, please seek out, have a look at the app, Be Avalanche Aware, and there's great information there to help you plan. Now, obviously, where you go, we need to relate back to the weather. So, always aim to plan to get the most from your journey. So try and correspond your journey to where the weather is perhaps a little bit more benign, or where you're avoiding some of the avalanche hazards. So yesterday on our mountains, we had low avalanche hazards. And today, with the new snowfall, we have moderate avalanche hazards. But again, that information's all there to help you navigate and negotiate around. And of course, as we look at the cloud behind me, the ability to navigate is going to be really central to a successful journey on the mountains.
Absolutely.
Now, if you're a navigator that relies on technology, please make sure that you have backup in terms of battery. But you're always slightly vulnerable if you're just relying on mapping on a phone, for example. And we always advocate map and compass if you're heading for the hills.
Oh, really good advice, Sean. Thanks very much indeed. And make sure you're dressed for the weather. Thanks, Sean. Much appreciated.
No, thanks, Kay.
Thank you. Well, what's believed to be the UK's oldest mountain rescue dog is being honoured with a so-called animal OBE. Here they are. 15-year-old Border Collie, Sky, hello, carried out around 200 searches during her 11-year career working in all weathers to help locate missing people in the Lake District. Today, she'll become the 36th animal to receive the PDSA Order of Merit. Good for you, Sky. And she's 11 years old, still walking up those mountains. Lovely. Now, mother of baby P, who died after months of abuse back in 2007, could be freed from jail after a parole board ruled that she's now eligible for release. Joining us is criminologist and head of psychology at Birmingham City University, and that's Craig Jackson. Hello to you, Mr. Jackson. Thank you for joining us on the programme. We're told that she has a low risk of reoffending. How difficult is it for somebody who has carried out such a monstrous crime to be rehabilitated?
Well, the parole board take their duty very seriously. As you can imagine, they have approximately 25,000 cases of prisoners who come up for parole every year. And the recruitment and training process is quite rigorous for staff who join the parole board, whether they're psychologists, psychiatrists, members from the probation panel, probation team, or social workers. They do know that the risks are there and that no decision made by a parole board is 100% safe. But of course, they base their decisions on expert interviews, on expert testimony, as well as face-to-face oral panels with the prisoners too. And I think we should remember that of the 25,000 cases that come across the desk of the staff at the parole board each year, they end up interviewing and speaking to only about 5,000 of those, and only about half of those are successful in being released, and about another 10 or 12% go to open prisons. So we're looking at a relatively small number of offenders who reoffend each year. Based on pre-pandemic statistics, we're looking at about 60 individuals who've reoffended after they've been released or sent to open prison. So the number itself, the absolute number, is quite small. But obviously, we're concerned about the most extreme offenders and those like Connolly, who've been convicted of very, very shocking crimes that go against what we believe the order of society should be.
Yeah. How, once they've made their decision, can that be overturned? I mean, we have heard that the Justice Secretary, Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab, has said he would be asking the board to reconsider.
The process for challenging the decisions made by the parole board is there, and it's been there pretty much in the form that it exists in since about the 90s, when the parole board became as independent as it could be. You can apply for a review if you are a victim or you are connected to the case in some way, But there's also the ability for a judicial review. So the Justice Secretary is perfectly within his right to do this. And most cases of release do come across the desk of the Justice Secretary or his office one way or another. So there's nothing particularly unusual in the action he's taken. But of course, it's a politically shrewd move to do that, just to try and double check and second guess that the parole board's decision is as safe as it can be given the circumstances of Connolly's complex background and her offending.
And how difficult is it for somebody like Tracy Connolly to come back into society? She'll need to change her name, I'm guessing, and where she lives. How difficult is it for somebody who's carried out such monstrous crimes to be rehabilitated themselves?
It's not an easy process when you work with offenders such as Connolly. You've got to look into their backgrounds, and indeed, Miss Connolly's background, her childhood was not a particularly good one, and social services were aware of her, and she was sent to an approved school, and various problems with family members. So her background is very complex and messy. But when you're working with offenders to try and challenge and ultimately change dangerous behaviours, such as the one she exhibited, it takes a long time to unpick what they did, their behaviours, their behavioural patterns, their attitudes, and their personality. And one of the first things you have to do is get the offender to admit their offence and what they did was wrong. Now, we do know that Connolly was released from prison previously on parole in about 2013. And unfortunately, she was sent back to prison because she breached the conditions of her parole. Thankfully, she hadn't committed any offences or contact offences against others, but she broke the terms of her parole licence and was recalled back to custody. So in one way, we can argue that the system does work. The decision made by the parole board at the time was wrong, but it was rectified and corrected, and she did go back into custody. That, of course, is something that the parole board will have considered in their latest decision.
Sure.
We need to remember that when we're looking at behaviour...
Unfortunately, we're out of time, so we're going to have to leave it there. So we'll leave it on that thought. But thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme. Much appreciated.
Thank you.